Mac, I read the news today. Oh
Ooh,
boy.
I read the news today. Oh boy.
Number one, that song deserves more credit. It's fucking fantastic.
Great song.
Number
One of the greatest
two,
songs ever.
it really is. Number two, did you hear about this? Wendy's was toying with possibly surge pricing on their menu.
I don't even know how they would do this. So if you out there at home didn't hear this, Wendy's was going to operate like Lyft and Uber. When the
Mhm.
demand was higher, their prices were going to be higher. But how would they determine that? The amount of mobile orders, the people in their drive-through
Mobile
line?
orders, maybe if, a long drive-through, a long line inside, it can just measure the amount of people ordering. But
It seems like they didn't have a good way
they
to
have
do it.
said, they've come out and said this, not going to happen.
Yeah, terrible idea. I just would never go to Wendy's again.
Or, hear me out, just eat on an off schedule. Just change how you eat food.
Like 10 a.m. and 8 p.m.
You eat at 10, 2, and 8:30.
2 might be still high traffic. I don't know. 10 and 8. Yeah, I feel like that would be it, but I also don't want to build my life around the Wendy's schedule.
Sir, you seem to have changed your lifestyle. Why? Well, Wendy started charging more around dinner time.
Baconator's only $1.50 at 8.
I only eat at 3:30 every day now. I eat a lot, but I only eat at 3:30.
I would be on board, but it wouldn't be this way. They would have the baseline price, right?
Yeah.
$6.50, $7.50, whatever it is for like
No, you need to lower it below the baseline.
They wouldn't do that though. They wouldn't do that.
That's where the bullshit is.
Yes, exactly.
You need to, if you are going to surge the price, you've got to help me out, thesaurus. No, thesaurus wouldn't be here. It'd
Opposite
be the dictionary.
of a surge.
What is the book that has the opposites in it?
Yeah. The antithesis.
It's the big book of Leif Erikson.
Like at 8:00, the Baconator should be $2.50. And then you get people coming in, and then it starts to go back up. Like, I just fucking bunch of bullshit. That's what Wendy's is.
One goo, three, yeah. Goo. Jaws 3. Goo. King of Queens. Goo. Meryl Streep. Entertainment.
I'm Goon.
And I'm a man.
And we are the Mac and Goo program. We bring you sand.
We bring you lots and lots of sand. This, in fact, has gone down as Anakin Skywalker's least favorite movie of all time. Goo!
Yes.
Today we were talking about Dune, Folie à Deux. That's right, Dune Part 2. Goo! When asked if I'm into Dune 2, I said, Dune 2 chicks at the same time.
Do you just want to get these out of the way right now?
When
I was at the theater, I spilled some popcorn and I said, did I do that?
All right, we absolutely crushed that opening. Folks, Dune Part 2 is a brand new release, so we have not seen the audience reaction yet. We are recording this of release night, day before release. However,
credit to us.
However, you're doing it here. We have seen it. What do we see? 8 days ago, 9 days ago now?
We saw it a while ago, and I have thought about it a lot.
Yeah, I have as well. And I've been asked by some prospective viewers, like, hey, what'd you think? And I always preface it to prop it up a little bit more. I did not love the first Dune movie that came out in 2021. I thought it was not a miss, but fell short of expectations. A little disappointed by it. And that said, I loved this movie. Loved it, loved it, loved it.
I liked the first movie, but I feel like in this, the movie came out during the pandemic. So I watched it half on my television, half on my phone.
Yep.
That might have affected my viewing.
I agree. Yep. I didn't see the first one in theaters. And this is one of those movies, especially after watching the second one, that the theater enhances the viewing so much.
And also, I wasn't even that excited to see this movie. I was pretty excited. I think we might have had it top 3 or 4 on our most anticipated movies on the year. But it wasn't something where I was like, finally, I'm going to see Dune 2. I was like, okay, Dune 2's tonight.
Yeah, I think the little bit of a disconnect for you is I'm a massive Denis Villeneuve fan, and you're like, You like him, but
Yes.
you don't like Blade Runner 2049 the way I do. You don't love Prisoners the way I do. So
Mhm.
he's not as high on your list as directors as he is for me. So as we ramped up towards this movie, as we got closer, I was getting more and more excited for it. I actually even went back and rewatched Dune Part 1 the day of the screening, like 6 hours before the screening, to sort of try to help me.
Two things here. Number one, having said what I just said, I cannot wait for Dune 3 or
Yes.
whatever
Yeah.
Dune we get next.
Right.
I am so excited to see where this story goes.
Yeah.
Also, let's get this out of the way at the beginning of this Dune podcast. We have never read a book.
Yeah. And a lot of the people that came away loving the first movie seem to be the people that read the book or were like in on Dune lore
Mhm.
20, 30 years ago. The people that grew up reading the Frank Herbert novel. Obviously, as non-book readers, we weren't those people.
So this one purely as a moviegoer. That's what we're talking about here.
Mhm.
Just moviegoer storytelling within, dialogue within, acting within, direction within. The cinematography, Mac.
You went so far as putting a note into the nuts and bolts here, which I don't think you've ever done before.
He
You have a-
deserves credit.
you
I
have a
would
note.
give Max Credit Union this man.
All right. Oh God, Goo.
You need to figure out what is wrong with you. Can you go to urgent care?
I'm leaving you my rollerblades in my will. Which, by the way, rest in peace, Richard Lewis.
Yes.
His final appearance on Curb Your Enthusiasm was him and Larry arguing about each other's wills, which is just so fitting for
That is really good.
those two.
Yeah.
Let's get into the nuts and bolts here, Goo. Dune Part 2 is a PG-13 action adventure drama and sci-fi with a runtime of 166 minutes. For a little bit of context, the first Dune is 155 minutes, so this is a little bit longer. Goo, PG-13, it feels like an R movie, doesn't it? Doesn't it feel like it's you're so invested and it's so brutal at points, it feels like an R movie?
Here is me just first off for the next hour, just essing this movie's D. I never once thought of the rating during this movie.
Same. I just felt like an R movie, and then now I know it's PG-13.
It just felt just like a pure movie. Like,
Okay.
you know how when you watch like, old Indiana Jones movies or like you never think of what the rating is.
Sure. Yeah. That's a good point. You were just so engrossed by what was going on.
I was in that world. I had to take my shoes off in the theater because I had sand in them.
On Roddy T's Goo, this debuted with a 95% on 64 reviews. It is currently at 96%. And this is just critic rating here on 207 reviews. So it's pretty locked into that 95, 96, 97 range. For reference, the first one had an 83% from
which
critics,
makes sense to me.
90% from the audience.
Because you could look at the first one as being a half a movie.
Yeah. And the audience score for this, I'm guessing, is going to be around 95. This is definitively better.
Let me also, and yes, we rail against Roddy T's constantly. I don't know how you could come away from this movie, even if you don't even love the story, how you could come away from this adventure saying this deserves less than whatever, a 6.5, whatever gives you the positive, because it's thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah.
How could you
as a critic, everything technically is really good to great, if not perfect, in this movie.
Like, if you,
I don't know how a critic doesn't like this movie.
Like, some of the bad reviews, and I can see where they're coming from, is they thought that some of the storytelling was too simplistic, but that's sci-fi. Sci-fi is always that, because
you have to keep the storytelling simplistic,
because that's also not what you're here for. You're not here for the story. You're here for the spectacle.
No, you never hear people criticize Star Wars for having a simplistic story.
Star Wars has the most simplistic.
It's a ripoff of this. Stories. It's a simple version of this.
Yeah.
So you never hear that criticism.
Star Wars is, those dummies books, like, Dune for Dummies?
Yeah.
That's Star Wars.
That is Star Wars, 100%. Goo, on Metacritic, this opened with an 80 on 22 reviews, a 79 currently on 48
That's
reviews.
very good, I think.
Very, very good. And in the range with a lot of the Villeneuve movies, he's pretty much in that high 70s, low mid 80s range. At one point, Goo, this was the highest rated movie ever on IMDb at a 9.4, but that has since dropped to 9.1, probably in response to that because people are trolls. Good. The first movie had a 73, so again, this is kind of a notch above on both Roddy T's and Metacritic, and for you and I both, I think we'd agree it's at least a notch above, if not 2 notches above that first movie.
Yeah, I didn't love the first one.
Yeah, it to me, and again, even when rewatching it a week and a half ago, the first 30 minutes is kind of messy and confusing, and then the end is really unsatisfying. So like the bread of the sandwich is not very good. The in between was pretty good and very interesting, but where it ends and where it begins just wasn't great. Dune Part 2, Folie et Deux, is written by Denis Villeneuve, whose only other writing credit is actually the first Dune movie. The second writer on this is John Spates, who's written Prometheus, Doctor Strange, Passengers, The Mummy, the Tom Cruise Mummy, and the first Dune movie. That's an interesting track record for sure. In development, he has something called St. George and the Dragon, The Forever War, World War Robot, Van Helsing, that is going to be a remake, The Black Hole, the Gears of War movie, and an untitled space adventure project. Sorry, forgive me. Of course, we talked about it. This is based.
Paul, forgive me.
This is based on the novel Dune by Frank Herbert. I believe that came out in 1965. Heavily influenced George Lucas's Star Wars scripts after he read it. This duo was the writer. Were the two writers?
Nah, that wasn't that good.
The two writers on the first movie, plus Eric Roth. So there was 3 writers. I wonder if Villeneuve brought Roth on for that first script to sort of teach him the ropes, because Roth has an extensive writing past and maybe wanted to just learn how to professionally do a script, and so he didn't include him in this one. Of course, directed by Denis Villeneuve. If you don't know who and what he's done so far, you've been living under a rock. I would say of the last 15 years, he's been definitively the best director on the planet. Christopher Nolan's best stuff, most of it came in the 2010s. He obviously is still great. Villeneuve has done Prisoners, Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, and of course the first 2, and all within the last 12 or 13 years. In development, he's working on something called Rendezvous with Rama, and in production, he has Dune Part 3 and the Cleopatra movie he's working on, so that's going to be very interesting. And Goo, here's your note.
Yes, cinematographer Greg Fraser. Give the man his flowers. This movie is just beautiful. The long gaping time sometimes between dialogue where you're just looking out over the sand, over the sun, the worms coming at you. Just great establishing moments.
Yeah, it's one of the best looking movies of all time, that's for sure.
He did Dune, The Batman, The Creator.
Did he do Blade Runner 2049? Because that's another one of the best looking movies of all time.
I just have those 3.
Okay. Synopsis of Dune Part 2. Paul Atreides unites with Chani. Is it Chani or Chani? I never quite could figure it out. It sounded like
Chani.
Both.
Chani. It's short for Chandler.
Chani and the Fremen while seeking revenge against the conspirators who destroyed his family. This movie stars Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides, Zendaya as Chani, Rebecca Ferguson as Jessica, that is Paul's mother, Javier Bardem as Stilgar. He is the leaders of the Fremen in the north.
And fantastic.
He's really, really fucking good.
He's so good in this.
Josh Brolin as Gurney Halleck, who is also amazing. Josh Brolin's voice is so good. And then him and Bardem going back and forth. We talk about it occasionally, but No Country for Old Men is so good because 90% of the movie is just him and Bardem. It's fucking amazing.
And then also, so like Chalamet is very good in this. And at a point in this movie, you're like, Chalamet is great in this.
Yeah.
But Chalamet is really propped up by those 2 actors.
Yeah, very true. That's for sure.
He's a scarecrow for a while, and they're just carrying him around.
We get Austin Butler as Fade Ratha here, who I thought he was awesome in a role that I couldn't picture him playing after.
Do you put him up there with the all-time villains? Because a lot of people are doing that right now.
No, because I don't think he really has a little bit of a spoiler here. I don't think he has the big villain win moment that you need to be like one of the all-time great villains. You know what I mean?
I also thought at times that I couldn't tell who was talking between him and Skarsgård.
He actually, in one of the lead-up interviews for this movie, the other cast members were like talking about how he sounded so much like Skarsgård, and he's like, "Yeah, that's what I did. I basically just mimicked him, and that's how I got the voice for this character."
I don't know if I like that.
All right. Well, it is his son, so it makes sense. Florence Pugh as Princess Irulan, who has sort of a subdued role in this, but it seems like she's going to mean a lot more going
Yeah.
forward.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Bautista is back as Beast Robin, who is
More like Beta Robin. Am I right?
Fade Rotha's brother and what's his name? The Baron's son as well. Christopher Walken in here as the Emperor, not in the first movie, but finally makes his debut here. He didn't distract me, which I thought
I'll
was
say,
good enough.
how do you like the casting?
Didn't distract me. Odd casting for sure.
I liked it.
Okay, good enough. Leah Seydoux as Lady Margot Fenrig. She is one of the Bene Gesserit. She also seems like she's going to have a larger role going forward. Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Harkonnen. He is the head of the House of Harkonnen.
Whole lot less of him in this movie than Dune 1.
Yeah, I don't think there was a ton of him in Dune 1, though. He matters in big moments, but there's not a ton of him.
I just think back to all of his scenes in Dune 1 because
Yeah,
that's what really pops out to me.
He chews the shit out of the scenery in Dune 1. No doubt about that. And then Charlotte Rampling, maybe the most underrated cast member here, Charlotte Rampling as Reverend Mother Moheim. She is Jessica's mother, Paul's grandmother. She is unbelievable as like this overarching witch type of character.
Yeah, and she has flying monkeys.
So to reiterate, the first Dune movie, I believe I gave it 33 hot dogs. I might have retconned it to 32. It was a good movie, a good setup. But like I said, where it leaves off, unsatisfying, and it's also a messy opening. Now I know more about the Dune past and like the lore in that universe. I don't know if they could have done a better opening, but the opening is still pretty messy.
So I did not go back and listen to our podcast. I have never listened to one of our podcasts, and I wouldn't recommend anyone do that.
Yeah.
But I believe I gave it a 34, but also said TBD, INC. I need to see what happens in this movie to then really grade out the first one. And I might give it a couple extra hot dogs.
Really?
Yeah.
I might even go the other way because I don't think there's any rewatchability to that first movie, especially after rewatching it last week.
Let me ask you this, as we are in non-spoilers. Do you, like, is it essential that you have to watch the first movie to understand this movie?
Yes, but I don't know if that's a good thing because now you need 4 hours and 15 minutes of run up to really appreciate what happens at the end of this movie.
And I do really appreciate what happened at the end of the movie. Mac is just coughing more and more.
This has been now talked about on the short list of greatest sequels ever, and I think it might be deserving. So some of the others that deserve mention here, obviously, Empire
Before you go on,
Strikes Back.
sorry, I think also what makes a great sequel is it needs to be better than the first movie.
Agreed. I'll agree with you
go
on
ahead.
that. Sort of the gold standard here, the one that everyone is measured against is The Empire Strikes Back. That was sort of the OG. Sequel is better than the original. Paddington 2, everyone says, is one of the best movies of all time. I've never seen it, probably never will. Actually, on tier with Empire is Godfather 2. That's the other one everyone references. Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, much better than the first one. Maybe a similar situation to what we got going on here. The Dark Knight, much better than Batman Begins. Terminator 2, I would say is probably better than the first one. Probably
I agree. Yes.
Is in this conversation. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse just came out last year, I think is in the conversation. Top Gun Maverick, maybe a tier below those movies, but much better than the first one. So sort of what we're talking about here.
I almost put that on like a tier of its own of being like so far superior to the first one.
Right.
That it's almost like its own thing.
But yet still a tier below all the movies we just talked about.
I wouldn't put Maverick up against like The Dark Knight, but but I also think The Dark Knight is close to Begins. I know that you don't, but like I kind of look at those as being fairly similar. I think Maverick completely blows the first one out of the water.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there. The last two here, Toy Story 2, I think a lot of people talk about as the best Toy Story and better than the first one, improves upon the first one. And then one that never gets listed because I wonder if people consider it the fourth movie, which it kind of is. It's the fourth
or the
Avengers
20th
movie. Avengers Endgame is the sequel to Avengers Infinity War, a continuation of that story. I think deserves mention in the conversation. But that's 10 movies right there. This movie is not at the top of that list. Say Empire and Godfather 2 at the top of that list, but it's probably in line with the next like 3 or 4 movies.
But also, and a lot like Top Gun to me, when I came away from Dune 1, I was like, okay, that's not bad. I
Yep.
want to see where this goes.
Yeah.
When I came away from this one, you were sitting next to me in the theaters. I was like, wow.
Right.
Wow, wow, wow.
Right. Yeah.
Fuck.
Totally agree. Totally
Yeah.
agree with that and the feeling on that. Before we go any further, too, if you're listening before you go into the theater, not that you expected one, but there is no mid or post credit here, so you don't have to waste your time sitting in there. Although you and I did sit in the theater for like an extra 10 minutes to just like mellow
soak it
in
in.
it, you know?
Like we knew that there was no post credit. I just sat in the chair and thought.
Yeah, hell of an experience. Really good experience.
Also, what might help you because the first hour or so, hour and a half, it's a lot of lead up. Get a nice big old bucket of popcorn.
Yeah, you
really helped me out.
You did. Yep,
yeah,
that's what you did. You were munching away over there.
I was munch a crunch.
Let's get into the gauntlet here.
Oh, also, isn't it crazy how we went from seeing Madam Web to Dune 2?
I've never as a back-to-back theater experience, I don't think there will ever be a wider gap ever. It's happening right now. I'm recognizing it in the moment. In my whole life, there will never be a wider gap in quality of movies between Madam Web and Dune Part 2.
Like everything about the quality too.
Yes, literally
visuals,
every single
writing,
thing.
acting.
It's unbelievable.
Everything is completely different.
Like this Dune Part 2 could have been a bad movie, but because I saw Madam Web before it, I loved it.
The meticulous attention to detail in one. Madam Web, of course, I'm talking about. But
I bet there's going to be a lot of people actually too that these are their back-to-back theater experiences as well, which is very interesting.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
Mac, fun factor. How much fun did you have? And I, beyond the visuals of it, storytelling wise, I loved the journey. I loved Paul's journey and the eventual buy-in, because there was a point in the movie where I'm like, do I accept this man as my Lord and Savior?
Right.
And then something happens and you say, wait a second. I'm in with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like the fun is mostly anticipation fueled.
Yes.
Like it's a lot of fun in the ramp up and where we're going. And it's really fun also on top of that to see Paul like ingratiate himself with the Fremen and live that lifestyle and be accepted. Like they did a really nice job in that first hour and a half, making the audience believe what was happening on the screen. There was no rush through it. Now there was a little bit to the point where I was like, all right, well, I want to get on with this, but it was done quite well.
Satisfactor. And this might be one of the highest Satisfactor movies, especially when talking about the last hour of it, because not only did you get a resolution to what's happening here, but you get a lead in to what could be 10 more movies.
There's something it was almost, I'm not going to compare it to like the feeling we had going into Endgame, like the nerves, big game nerves, but because there was so much promised and so much built up in the first 4 hours of these two runtimes, the final hour and when it was coming upon us, I was like, I really hope this nails it because they've been setting up for this fucking big grandiose thing.
Speaking of which, Borometer, I did check my phone around the 90-minute mark, but it was just to see like where are we time-wise and how are they going to use the clock? How are they going to Patrick Mahomes this, bring us to the 2-minute warning, and then score the old touchdown?
Yeah.
Sports
again,
reference.
the final hour is incredibly satisfying. Yes. But to your point, Barometer, I also checked my phone once, and it was in that like in between, somewhere between the second and third act. I was
yes,
like,
it might have been in like the hour 15 to hour 30.
Yeah,
it was like, okay, like I think we need to move on here.
Right, I get it now. I've bought in. I want to get to this jumping off point.
Aquator, is this better than 2017's Aquaman?
I guess it is, and we'll find out if it's better than the sequel pretty soon.
Halloween, will this wane over time for you? And I guess we need to see what the third movie does.
Mm-hmm.
That's
a good point.
100th movie.
I also, because it's so much buildup, I don't know how often I'm going to go back and watch the first movie, maybe never, or the first half of this movie. But the last hour and 15 of this is going to be super rewatchable. If someone could just put the last hour 15 on YouTube, I would rewatch that fucking once.
Put it on Twitter. Make sure you have a blue check mark.
Yeah.
Pants Tent City, Excite Bike Mania. What got you going from this movie and the visuals of the first 90-ish minutes to go along with some of the battles, the worm riding, the anticipation really, gave you little blue balls, riding up to it. The first movie, blue balls at the end. But, this one, you're just sitting and waiting. And then the final hour is almost just call your doctor.
The whole movie, at least the first half and part of the first movie, is the Fremen and talking about this Messiah, or they say Muad'Dib, Lisan al-Gaib, like these words that they're tossing around that you don't even really understand what they're saying, but they're talking about the Messiah and Paul's potential is that. And even the Bene Gesserit talking about the Kwisatz Haderach, like Paul's ascension into that role is what this movie is about.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it culminates in a couple fantastic moments is so satisfying and really great pants tense. It's just the payoff and the satisfaction was totally worth the buildup. And I can't underscore that enough. Like it's so necessary to go through that first 4-hour journey, for better or worse, to get the satisfaction over the final hour.
Max Credit Union. Who do you give credit to? I will toss it at Greg Fraser for Denis Villeneuve. He's recently spoken about how he doesn't love dialogue in movies. I would argue that you could possibly put this in another language, have no subtitles on it, and still understand the entire story.
Yeah, partially because it's mildly confusing at the beginning in English anyways, so the visuals are just fun to look at.
Great visuals.
My credit goes to Timothée Chalamet because, and we talked about this in the first movie and kind of alluded to it here early on. I never thought I could believe him in this big badass role, like this leader of men, this Messiah type of role. And man, did he prove me wrong, Goo. Like the moment in this film when it flips, I was like, oh, this is awesome.
Just before that flip, I was saying to myself, I wish he was 6'3" and a little bit hunkier.
Right. 100%. And then somehow when it happens, the moment you fucking buy in, you're like, wow, I can't believe I'm buying into this.
Hot dogs. Hot dogs for Dune.
Hot sandy dogs.
This is a journey. This is a 5-hour journey. You need to include the first one, and it is a long one, Mac. And, it is daunting at times. It is, they spend a lot of time, a lot of meticulous time making sure that everything is correct. All the visuals are perfect, and it completely pays off. Yes, it's long, but I have no complaints about any of that. It looks beautiful. The acting is, while there are definitely some standouts, I think there's no bad performances. There's no one that sticks out and you're like, well, that guy sucks.
Right.
The direction, I think the director in general deserves a lot of credit for that, keeping everyone to exactly what they need to be. And at the end of this movie, it leaves you in the best possible way where you feel so satisfied, but then you say, I have to wait 2 more years for another one of these. Like, there's so many different scenarios in my head right now of where they could go with this. And I know that they're going to pick a better one than what I can even think of. Yeah. I don't always think that way. I think that I'm smarter than most people and that I could write a better script and do a better movie than most people. But I have so much faith in this group that they'll do a better job than me.
The only 2 movies in recent memory that I have a similar feeling to, and this is more of a complete ending than those other 2. Those other 2 are more open-ended, are Infinity War and Across the Spider-Verse. At the end of those movies, the desire for more of that story is comparable to what we get at the end of this movie.
This also does an amazing job of blending the movie-going experience with cinema.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's a little bit the way Oppenheimer did it, where it's cinema and acting and all these technical things that are done well, but on a big budget and deserves to be seen in a movie theater.
It's wonderful.
That's
it's
a good word
fucking
for
wonderful.
It. That's a good word for it.
Mac, are you ready for this?
Yeah, let's hear it.
This is my first ever one of these.
Oh.
I'm giving it a soft 40.
Goo, I just asked you 3 days ago, are you giving this movie 40 hot dogs? And you're like, nope. Definitely not 40 hot
I
dogs.
keep thinking about it, and I keep thinking about that final hour, and it's like, that's perfect. And I accept the storytelling and a little bit of like the pacing at the beginning to getting us there, because you need all of that, because I love the fact that I didn't buy into this guy. I'm one of those people where I'm like, I don't know if this guy's going to lead, and I
Yeah.
would follow him anywhere now.
I totally understand your reasoning for bumping
Ask
it up
me
to that
next week
40-ish.
if I'm still 40 and it's going to change. I'm saying right now,
Yeah.
it's the best movie I've seen in the last week.
I'm comparing it to the recent 40s. Like last year, Oppenheimer and Spider-Verse, I gave 40. I like definitively like those two movies more than I like this movie.
Mhm.
In part because there's so much buildup. There's such a ramp leading up for what happens in the final act of this movie. So I just don't feel right giving it 40,
The
knowing
roller
that you
coaster
need 4 hours of
of what
buildup.
this movie is it's just like click, 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 click,
Yeah,
click, click, click.
right.
It's that for 2
I just I
hours.
like I
And
don't
then out of
feel
nowhere,
I don't feel like it deserves 40 because you
and
need the
I
4
don't
hours of
know if it
buildup.
does either. Like, I might even look, it's probably closer to like a 9.5 or something like that, which that equals out to like 38 hot dogs. But I don't want to be on the wrong side of history.
All right, fair enough, Goo. Goo, Goo, Goo.
Yes, Mac?
You could have considered me and us a Dune skeptic coming off that first movie, as we've talked about here. And I have loved literally everything else Villeneuve has done. Other than the first Dune, I think my lowest rated movie from him is Arrival, which was a fucking pretty fantastic movie. I just felt like Dune fell short of expectations in what Villeneuve was capable of. So heading into this movie, there was like a lot of things this movie was going to have to accomplish and to deliver on for me to really like love this movie.
It got a full buy-in. That's the
Yeah.
whole thing.
And it was not only the promise from the director, but these Dune people on the internet, like, just you wait, like you'll see.
It's
And
our friend Wesley Burho,
yeah, he's
who
one of
would
them. Yep.
no, but him retweeting all the people, all the critics being like, "This is the best movie ever," and I'm like, "Let's all chill out." And then you see it and you say, "They might not be wrong."
Yeah, there's like 95% of the time when someone's like, just you wait, it's never worth it. This is one of the 5% of the times where it was totally worth it.
Mhm.
So I am happy to report that it delivers on everything that it promised, everything that it's supposed to be. The story with like all these galactic houses sort of pushing and pulling against each other is like simple to grasp once you get over the first movie. Like once you have seen the first movie, you now understand what's
And they
going
put
on.
this all pretty much on one planet.
Yes, so I'll get into that a little bit too. But that simple story of just like the 7 houses pushing and pulling on each other is easy
Yes.
to grasp. And then you mix that in with like the fantasy and sci-fi elements. It's awesome. Like you have like the witch type stuff,
Game of
obviously
Thrones, Star
intergalactic
Wars,
stuff.
Lord of the Rings.
I just love messing around in this universe. Now,
Mhm.
granted, and this is I actually do think it's a detriment. Now you have to do it because there's no other way to buy into the story. But taking over 4 hours of setup is like it has to be talked about. You need the 4 hours of setup to become invested in the story and in everything that's about to happen. And to me, and this is why we love movies, Goo. To me, the best stories, the best movies, you can get in and out in 2 hours. Now, I'll watch a 3-hour movie. I'll watch a 5-hour movie, 5.5-hour movie like these two are. But I don't know if that makes it better. Some might say, "Oh, it's so dense, it's so in depth that that's why it's better." I don't necessarily disagree. That said, after all this buildup and this payoff, the spot that we're left in at the end of this movie is very satisfying, and simultaneously, you're wanting more. You're wanting to see what happens next. So all of that is like not even considering the visuals, the score, which is
I was
fucking
just gonna bring up the
unbelievable.
fucking score was amazing.
Yeah, I think the visuals and the score, you could have a conversation about them being
The
the best
sound as well. So like
Yeah.
we
ever.
recommend this.
Soundscape, like
So
just
see this in the biggest theater you possibly can and try and sit on a speaker like you're listening to Howard Stern in private.
yeah, the theater we saw it in, it had like the full surround.
Yes.
The seats were fucking rumbling. But again, my main knock on it, and this is what I think keeps it out of the 40 dog range, is because it's so much buildup. To me, that's a bit of a flawed story. Not a massive flaw. It's just a small flaw that keeps it out of the conversation of like best ever. It's just a slight tier below. But like if you stick all that out, you benefit big time. Like the viewer benefits big time as we did and as we're talking about. So I have this at 39 hot dogs. Just one step below 40.
Boo, 39.
It's the early
That
leader.
sucks.
Early leader in the clubhouse for best movie of 2024. Now I've only seen 6, but it is definitively, it's like 2 tiers above anything else I've seen this year so far. Certainly in the conversation for greatest sequel of all time. Probably isn't 1, 2, or 3, but it's in the conversation. It's also not my favorite Villeneuve movie, actually. I have Blade Runner ahead of it, which is a fucking masterpiece. That's a 40 dogger. I also have Prisoners ahead of this goo, which is like a borderline 40 dogger. I also think Prisoners is the most underrated movie of the last 15 years. So if you haven't seen Prisoners, go fucking watch that. But I do have this above Arrival, and it might be above Sicario too.
Okay.
This and Sicario are sort of back and forth for that third spot. But this movie, you and I are echoing the same sentiment here. Coming into it, not really expecting 40 dogs, but expecting it to be better than the first, and then it approaching 40 dogs is why this, like, walking away, us feeling almost like a grin on our faces.
This movie made me like the first one more.
I don't agree with you on that. So that's probably the difference between the 39 and the 40 right here. It almost makes me like the first one less because I felt like you still could have done some fantastical elements in the first one, and they didn't really do it. They kept it pretty subdued.
They needed Paul to be a boy in the first one, and now
he's not really like. He's only a boy in the first act of that movie. Like he progresses pretty fucking quickly.
Not as quickly, not that quickly. Like boy, and then his voice started to change, and now he's a man.
So before we get into full spoilers here, we'll run through the quick recap of the first movie and what's happened in this universe. So pre-Dune, pre that first movie, there was a massive war between man and machine, with man winning, and it basically meant that all like machine AI technology became taboo. That's why you don't really see that in this universe. You just see people with some of those abilities, but you don't see droids like you have in Star Wars. Spice is the most valuable resource in this universe because that's what powers like the galaxy ships and how they get from point A to point B and whatnot. And spice is only found on Arrakis. That's why this story is set on one planet. And the people of Arrakis, the Fremen, used to call the planet Dune. That's why it's called Dune. At the beginning of the first movie, the Emperor takes the planet of Arrakis away from House Harkonnen and awards the planet to House Atreides. But this all ends up being a ploy to get the Duke and his family on Arrakis to have them killed. That plan was a simultaneous plan between Mother Mohiam, Jessica's mother, Paul's grandmother, and the Emperor. Ultimately, obviously, Paul and Jessica escape into the desert and meet up with the Fremen, and we basically get a to be continued, which picks up right where this movie leads into.
Also, credit to Zendaya. We haven't mentioned Zendaya really at all.
Great point.
She's great in this.
I forgot his name. Sorry. Javier Bardem as Stilgar stands out. Obviously, Timothée Chalamet still stands out. Zendaya is maybe the best character in the whole movie.
And also, you know that she's going to play the biggest part moving forward.
We were talking about this on the way out of the theater. The love triangle.
Now? Spoilers?
Yeah, spoiler alerts. The love triangle that is coming up, presumably in the third movie, based on the book Dune Messiah, between Florence Pugh's character, Princess Irulan, Chani, and Paul is like super intriguing. Like I really need to see how that plays out.
To the point of, you know, that one of them is either going to kill another one or kill two of them.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if it's Zendaya. Zendaya. I don't want to mess this up.
Zendaya.
I believe that she's going to be the one that kills Paul. Keep this in mind also. I know nothing of the books.
Yeah.
I don't plan on looking at the books. I think she's going to kill Paul, and then Anya Taylor-Joy is the actual chosen one.
Yeah. So one of the major things in this movie is we figure out, I don't think we know this in the first movie. I think we figure it out at the beginning of this movie, is Jessica is pregnant with a daughter, and both Jessica and Paul can somehow communicate.
Almost like an immaculate reception.
They can communicate with the daughter's sister in the womb, who will be played by Anya Taylor-Joy in the next movie. So there's obviously going to be a time jump between the end of this and the beginning of the third movie.
But she's also a talking fetus, so maybe she can just grow up in a
She's
day.
talking fetus. We did get her in like one dream scene. She really just stares. But that was surprising to see her get cast, and then like she's pretty much not in the movie at all. So I'll run through. I kind of have this in chronological order here. You can just chime in whenever.
Do your thing, babe.
So the first half of this movie is much of a continuation as the third act from the first movie. It's a journey of Paul both fulfilling his destiny and also ingratiating himself with the Fremen. So the Fremen are the people of Arrakis, of Dune. The people of the north are more of these like rebellious freedom fighters led by Stilgar. He's one of the leaders there. The people in the south, which we don't get mentioned in the first movie, we discover here that they're more like religious extremists who don't have much contact with like any other like outside people.
They are sheep waiting for a shepherd.
They are waiting for their Messiah. So they are much more ready to buy into this idea of Paul as the Messiah. One of the big things that happens in the first or second act of this movie, Goo, is Margot Fenrig. She's the one played by Léa Seydoux. She gets impregnated by Fade Ratha, played by Austin Butler, and she purposely has it, or is going to have a daughter. And she's a Bene Gesserit, and the whole Bene Gesserit thing is it's supposed to be a girl, it's supposed to be a daughter, and that's why Mohiam is pissed at Jessica and Paul, because she doesn't want a male to like take on that role. So that's a big thing also that's going to play into the next movie, presumably, because that child is going to be about the same age as Paul's sister. And so those two are going to play a massive role, you think, going forward. But I am a little worried in the sense that there's so much that I'm looking forward to in this universe, but they're going to like automatically have to do like a 15-year time jump for the next movie, which will be,
like I said, I think that they're going to nail this. Yeah.
At this point, there's no reason to think they won't. Jessica becomes the Reverend Mother of the Fremen after drinking the blue worm piss. I had a little fun with the worm piss. I like that it's worm piss. It didn't bother me. And that's a little like Star Wars like thing too. Like they have quirky shit like that.
Yeah.
Princess Irulan has been groomed by Mother Mohiam, presumably this whole time, to position herself either next to Paul, which is a possibility, or next to Fade Ratha. So in Mohiam's eyes, like she's going to win either way because she's been grooming her the whole time. And again, Mohiam's the one that orchestrated the assault on House Atreides in the first place. And unbeknownst to pretty much everyone, she knows that the Emperor is going to be displaced either way. So she's got her hands in everything here. This movie really underscores that the Bene Gesserit are in charge of everything. Like, even if it doesn't work out in the moment, they're playing the long game. They're not really concerned about the in-between. About halfway through the movie, Fade Ratha replaces his brother Beast Rabin as the governor of Arrakis. And I you know what? The one character I've been a little disappointed with is Dave Bautista's Beast Rabban. He doesn't do anything cool at all in either of these.
He's
two
just a
movies.
big goofy fuck.
He looks cool. He just doesn't do actually
He's
anything
dumb as
cool.
shit too.
The biggest moment, Goo, here, and this is what leads into the final hour of the movie, and the first major pants tent for me is when Paul ascends to this Messiah role
in the church.
Right before, like when he drinks the piss, and then he has, but like leading into that church temple scene, when he walks into that church,
yes,
before he even says anything, just the way he walks through the crowd to the middle of it, you're like, oh, this is like, it's happening. Like
I said,
I'm in on it. I'm believing it.
No buy-in to him at all. I was like, okay, this is pretty good. He's learning the way and everything else. But then once we go into that church, I am completely like, this was perfect casting. You nailed this.
The way he transitions his acting from like lover boy and just attached to Chani and the Fremen, and transitions to like this Messiah role is so like, I don't know how many actors can do that. It's a small switch he flips, and it's not this big manic thing he does.
No,
but whatever switch he flipped was fucking perfect. Because when he gives that speech as the Messiah in the temple, you're like, oh fuck, like I'm ready to go to war with this guy. Like I'm ready for it. I'm actually believing it.
I don't care that he's 5'7".
Yeah, right. Like somehow I'm on board here. And that's because of all that buildup. And it's actually because of Timothée Chalamet. Like Timothée Chalamet is the reason why that scene works and why that switch flip works. And I just don't know how many actors could pull that off these days. And that's why he gets my credit. Another major moment in this movie is we find out that Paul's mother, Jessica, is actually the daughter of Baron
Yes.
Harkonnen. And we find that out because Paul drinks the worm piss and becomes all seeing. And he's
I also
like,
like how the Harkonnens are like, yeah, whatever. We don't look
so
like
we
they
find
find out. He even says like, "Oh, you're my cousin."
right,
All right, fucking
right.
killed cousins before.
So now we find out, and this is why Paul is such a central character and the main character of this whole story. Not only is the Duke of the Atreides family now, the Duke of Arrakis, he is Bene Gesserit because of his mother, and he is also in the Harkonnen bloodline. So he has a little piece all over the place, and it like makes him so central on so many levels. Um, so again, once he gets to that temple is where things kick up and where we first truly believe him. And then when they like plan out this massive attack on the emperor and his emperor's people in the middle of the desert there, it's fucking awesome. Like that is one of those moments where because 4 hours of buildup has happened, you just sort of get to turn off your brain and watch the next hour without thinking much. And it's a full pants tent for like the full hour. So Paul kills the Baron in that emperor's little lair. And then he ends up dueling Fade Ratha in that like Fremen cave. And it's such an awesome, it's a simple fight, but it's such an awesome fight metaphorically and what happens there. And I love how it all plays out. And obviously they're fighting right there, but Irulan on one side and Chani on one side, like seeing everything come together. It's just, there's so many things happening there that is unsaid, to Villeneuve's point, that you don't need all the dialogue. Like your audience can read into what's happening. And that's my favorite scene of the movie. The temple scene's amazing and what gets me to buy in, but the fight, the duel between him and Fade Ratha in that little cave mountain is such an awesome scene on so many levels. And then you also have Gurney killing Robin, like as the Harkonnen is trying to flee the planet. And then following the duel, Paul makes the Emperor kiss his feet, which is just an awesome, like a kiss the rings type of thing. And Irulan promises to take Paul's hand if he spares the Emperor's life. And then the good lead in to the next movie or the next actions in this universe is that the other 6 or 7 houses refuse to recognize Paul Atreides' ascension into this Messiah Emperor role. And so they're basically implying that this holy war has begun between all of these houses. And like, that's a brand new whole intriguing thing that we can play with.
And also, it really is when Josh Brolin gets into this movie, that's when it's kicked up to that whole new notch right there. Because it's semi-samey for a lot of the first part of him trying to get these people behind him. But then once Brolin's in there, that's when the war begins. That's when he really takes that next step into being the man.
It's almost like, and you've already said this, but like Stilgar and Gurney, you said they prop him up. It's almost like they're the two people on his shoulders. One's his confidence, like Gurney's like his confidence and figuring out like where he's going to be.
But also
Stilgar's like his subconscious almost,
But also it's almost like at one point he had kind of forgotten who he was or who he came from.
Was trained to be.
And then once Brolin shows up, he's like, okay, I forgot about my father. I forgot about my family. My family is here now. And I need to step up and do what I need to do.
And the way that Zendaya then transitions once Brolin comes into it, like it's such a subdued thing, but like the way she starts looking at him and her actions, it's so good. Like this movie relies so heavily on the moments between Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet, and they play it absolutely perfectly. It like you could not have casted it better. They could not have acted it better, because for a moment there's a budding romance in this movie, and it's for probably 45 minutes. It's so heavy on just those two, but what's happening between just those two means so much for the rest of the universe, and it's just incredibly well done.
Yeah, there's a 45-minute stretch where it's like a coming of age rom-com.
And Stilgar's just hanging out in the back, like, see, told you.
Yeah, I'll sacrifice my life for you.
And also, like, Rebecca Ferguson does an amazing job in this. Like, she doesn't, like, you don't really realize that she has ulterior motives until way too far into this movie. She seems like almost like a subdued, like, fine, I'll do it. I'm just going to do it because I'm here. My son's here. But then once she drinks that worm piss, you realize like, oh, she's kind of a bad lady. Like she's gonna
Yeah,
do
you
something
thought at
that's
the
gonna
beginning
cost
she was
people
just
things.
doing it for her son.
And then during the duel, this is why the duel is my favorite scene of the movie. Her looking over like at her mother and being like, "Fucking told you so. Pick the wrong side, asshole." That was great.
You know what also sucked for her is that she fell asleep at a party with her shoes on, so they drool over her face.
Oh man, every fucking character, whether they had 2 minutes or 20 on screen in this movie, just fucking crushed it. Absolutely crushed it.
Do you want to change your hot dog score?
No, no. Again, it's hard for me to because Goo, if you're trying to sell someone on Dune and Dune Part 2, you have to tell them, listen, I know not much is going to happen for 4 hours, but the 5th hour is so amazing that you need to watch the 4 hours. Like to me, that just knocks it down just slightly.
I would
Just
say,
slightly.
listen, how long do you sit on the toilet for at a time? Can you get it on your phone? Can you watch the first movie on your phone? Because that's what I did.
Listen, I don't want to be criticized because I didn't say it's one of the greatest movies of all time.
Attack.
It's
Attack.
just a
Attack.
tier below that. It's just a tier below that for me. I
Attack,
loved it.
Mac.
It's one of the best movies of the last 20 years for sure.
Yeah. I loved it.
It's a great movie.
Yes.
Fantastic movie. I can't wait to rewatch the last hour.
I can't wait for the next movie.
Yes, that is
I cannot wait.
that as well.
I might be one of those people now that follows it on social media and just picks up every little grubby detail.
I'm actually very much looking forward to the new Rockstars breakdown of this movie because I'm sure they're going to point out shit that we've missed, you know.
But also, listen to me right now. If something happened in the books, I don't care. Don't tell me.
Yeah, or tell me. I'm going to forget about it. But
No,
just
I am here for the movies. I don't care about
But
the
again, a big reason why the first movie doesn't work too is because we didn't know anything about the universe and you kind of needed to know a little bit leading into that movie.
Spice World. Tell me what you want, what you really want. Hey, our lover.
Let's get into Maxac.
And Mac, that could be anything. It could be a boat. And Mac, did you see this? But my son, boom, roasted you.
I'll tell you, your son has a clear future in comedy based off of this one joke. Pretty incredible.
So my wife and my son for my birthday got me a personalized Funko Pop where it says goo on the box.
Yeah.
And what my son did is he took it out of the box and he's playing with it and he realized that you could take the hair off.
Mm-hmm.
And what he did was he looked at it with the hair on. He looked, Daddy. Then he popped the hair off. Mac.
He's not wrong.
Nope.
He's not wrong.
People have said this is that we are two white guys who have a podcast. One has hair, one doesn't.
The best part of the whole thing is like he understands what he's saying too. When he pops the hair off, he's laughing.
Oh, yeah. He
like,
thought it
he's
was the funniest thing ever.
incredible.
He thought it was
So good.
hilarious.
It's really good.
And then people have complained to me being like, why doesn't that Funko have a mustache? Apparently, as of last week or 2 weeks ago, they didn't have that feature on there and they have it now.
Wow.
So someone's getting some emails. Funko is getting some emails being like, hey, my husband needs a mustache.
You can get on there with a little nail polish.
I was going to, that was my first thought. But now that I know that it's a possibility, I want you to send me a mustache and brown hair. I don't have black hair.
Oh, they didn't have brown hair either?
I don't know if someone just overlooked that or they don't know what color my hair is.
Okay. Right.
But I would also like brown hair.
Yeah. I was a brown hair boy when I had hair.
Ooh, brown hair.
Brown-eyed boy.
The brown hair. All right. That'll do it for this podcast.
Hazel. Oh, go.
I have hazel eyes. That's what people say about us. They say that it's two white guys on a podcast, hazel eyes, and hair, no hair.
I'll tell you, if this doesn't work out with the movies and television, we'll just start talking about stuff, and our podcast will be two guys with hazel eyes.
If anyone wants to, and I'm looking at you, the other Billy D, if you can cut off the top of my head, the top of Mac's head, and flip them, I bet we can't tell who's who.
We're both gonna look terrible.
I probably wouldn't know. It's like when you switch people around, you're like, tell me who the right person is now.
I don't know that game.
It's in every cartoon. Where can the people find us?
You can find us on Twitter and on Instagram at Mac and Goo Podcast. Every other platform, it's Mac & Goo. Mac Shift 7 Goo includes Facebook, Stitcher, TuneIn, Castbox, Spreaker, Google Play,
iHeartRadio.
We're on Spotify, but more importantly, we're on Apple We're on Apple
Apple
Podcasts.
cuckpast.
Rate, review, subscribe, 5 stars. If you do that, we'll get you a free Mac and Good t-shirt from the folks over at Watertown Sportswear.
Pens too.
Watertown Sportswear on 34 Mount Auburn Street in Watertown. WatertownSportswear.com. Expert screen printing and embroidery.
We have pens. Guys, go out there and write more reviews. If we don't get more reviews, the fucking show is done. We're going to end the show.
Penly pen.
tpublic.com merch. Check us out at the beginning of next week for our movie drafts.
At the end of the week,
yes.
Are we gonna record that live, or are you gonna edit that video?
I'm probably gonna record it and then post it after.
I was gonna say it might just be worth recording live, because with a 4-way, it might get fucked up anyways, you know.
So it's not recording live. You mean you want me to stream it live?
That's what I'm talking about. Yes,
because recording it live is what I do. I'm recording it live right now.
Yeah. No, I mean the video portion.
How about this? If I get one tweet, if I get one email saying put it live, I'll fucking do it live.
I don't really care either way. I'm just thinking you won't be able to edit the video much because it'll probably suck. So
no, I don't really edit the videos. What I do is I just put them out like a half an hour after the audio's out.
If it affects the audio quality, then forget what I said.
I think it affects the visuals a little bit. Like, it isn't as crisp.
Gotcha. All right. We'll see. Whatever.
So next week, that and Goovy Vaults. So thank you for joining us. Tuesdays are Goose Days. I abuse kangaroos.
Bye.
Please flip the cassette over to side B to continue the adventure.
Get her down.